"Can I sweep your house in exchange for a place to sleep?" He refused, but when he saw who it was, Martha Sullivan felt her legs tremble as she knelt at the gate of the most imposing mansion in Aspen. Her worn-out clothes contrasted with the elegance of the property, and her calloused hands came together in silent supplication. It was then she saw the man hurriedly exit the house, adjusting the knot of his expensive tie and carrying a leather briefcase. Gathering all the courage she had left, Martha called out to him. "Please, sir," she shouted, making Richard Harrington stop halfway to his imported car. "Can I sweep your house in exchange for a place to sleep? Just that, I beg you." Richard didn't even look at her directly. His cold eyes quickly scanned the figure of the kneeling woman, and he shook his head impatiently. "I don't need any staff," he replied curtly, continuing toward the automatic gate that was already beginning to open. Martha got up with difficulty and ran to him, grabbing the hem of his bespoke designer suit. The hopelessness in her voice was palpable. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll clean, cook, tend the garden. I just need a little corner to rest my head." Richard pulled away with a sharp movement, pushing her back. The woman stumbled but didn't fall. She just stood there, watching him get into the black Apex luxury sedan and speed out the gate, without a single glance back. The sound of the engine faded into the distance, but Martha remained standing in the same spot. Her tears fell silently onto the well-kept asphalt of the mansion's driveway. It was then she heard a soft voice coming from the gate. "He never helps anyone," whispered Mrs. Beatrice, the 68-year-old housekeeper who had worked in that house for over 2 decades. Her grey hair was tied in a simple bun, and her impeccable white apron contrasted with the look of pity in her brown eyes. Martha approached the bars, gripping the iron rods tightly. "Have you worked here a long time?" "Since he was married," replied Beatrice, looking around to make sure they were alone. "But that changed 15 years ago. Ever since his wife left and took the little girl, he's turned to stone, doesn't want to help a soul. He has a daughter?" "Had," corrected the housekeeper, her voice heavy with sadness. "A beautiful little girl, with the bluest eyes I've ever seen. But her mother disappeared with her one night, left only a note. Ever since, the master hasn't been the same man." Martha gripped the bars tighter, her knuckles turning white. "What was she like?" "The girl?" Beatrice studied the woman's face curiously. "Why do you want to know?" "Just curiosity," lied Martha, averting her gaze. The housekeeper hesitated for a moment, then sighed. Brown, curly hair, just like her father. But the eyes, those were her mother's, blue as a summer sky, had a dimple in her right cheek when she smiled, and she smiled a lot back then. Martha closed her eyes as if that description stirred some old pain within her. "What was her name?" "Claire," answered Beatrice. "Claire Harrington. Why all these questions?" But Martha was already walking away, moving slowly down the tree-lined street. Beatrice watched her until she disappeared around the bend, a strange feeling taking hold in her chest. The next day, promptly at 7 in the morning, Martha was back at the gate. Richard came out at his usual time, wearing another impeccable suit, the same hard expression on his 52-year-old face. "Mr. Harrington," she called, but he didn't even slow his pace. "I said I don't need anyone," he replied without looking at her. "But I can work just for food. You don't have to pay me anything." Richard stopped abruptly and turned, his dark eyes flashing with irritation. "Listen well, I don't want beggars hanging around my property. If you keep showing up here, I'll call the neighborhood watch." Martha felt the sting of the words but didn't move from the spot. "I am not a beggar, sir. I am a woman who has fallen on hard times, but I am not a beggar." "Whatever you are, I don't care," retorted Richard, getting into the car and slamming the door shut. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out now. Continuing. Martha remained there until the car had completely disappeared. Then she sat down on the curb in front of the mansion and kept watching the property. The house was truly impressive. 3 stories, perfectly manicured gardens, a fountain in the center of the grounds, and huge windows that reflected the morning sun. Beatrice appeared again at the gate, this time with a cup of coffee in her hands. "Are you going to stay there all day?" "If I have to," replied Martha, gratefully accepting the hot coffee. "What's your name?" "Martha Sullivan. And yours?" "Beatrice. I've worked here since I came from Tennessee 23 years ago. I've never seen the boss change his mind about anything." "Then I need to find a way to make him change," said Martha, taking a sip of the coffee. "This coffee is delicious." "Thank you. Do you have children, Martha?" The question made Martha pause, the cup halfway to her lips. "I did," she answered softly. "A daughter." "What happened to her?" Martha took a long time to answer, as if each word cost a piece of her soul. "Life took her away from me. It was a long time ago." Beatrice noticed the deep pain in the woman's voice but didn't press the subject. Instead, she offered a small sweet honey roll she had brought. "You look like you haven't eaten properly in days." "Weeks," corrected Martha, accepting the roll with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for your kindness." Richard returned home at 6 in the evening, as he always had since his wife left. He found Martha still sitting in the same spot, now talking quietly with Beatrice through the bars. "Still here?" he asked, getting out of the car impatiently. "I thought I was clear yesterday." "You were very clear, sir," replied Martha, standing up slowly. "But I need to be clear too. I'm not giving up." "Not giving up on what, exactly?" "On getting a job in this house." Richard laughed bitterly. "And what makes you think I would change my mind?" "Because everyone deserves a second chance, including you." The answer took Richard by surprise. No one had spoken to him that way in years. "A second chance at what?" "At being human again," said Martha, looking directly into his eyes. Richard felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he had buried long ago, but he quickly pushed it away. "Beatrice, I don't want to see this woman talking to you again." "Understood." "Yes, sir," replied the housekeeper, but her tone made it clear she didn't approve of her employer's attitude. Richard went inside, slamming the door, leaving Martha and Beatrice alone outside. "He wasn't like this before," murmured Beatrice. "When Mrs. Evelyn was here, he smiled. He played with Claire in the garden. He sang in the shower." "What changed, besides them leaving?" "Everything. He stopped seeing his friends, stopped going out for fun, stopped dating. He lives only for work and for this empty house. It's as if he buried his soul along with his dreams." Martha looked at the mansion's windows, imagining what life was like inside. "Do you think he still loves his ex-wife?" "I think he loves the idea of what they had, but mostly he loves the daughter he lost. He still has her room untouched, you know. No one is allowed in there, not even me to clean." "On the second floor?" Beatrice stopped and looked at Martha with surprise. "How do you know it's on the second floor?" Martha realized she had said something she shouldn't have. "I assumed. In houses like this, the children's room is always on the second floor, away from the commotion." "That's true," agreed Beatrice, but she continued watching Martha with curiosity. On the third day it rained heavily. Martha arrived at the gate soaked, shivering from the cold, but as determined as ever. Richard saw her from the living room window while having his breakfast and felt a pang of something that could have been guilt. Beatrice ran out with an umbrella, but it was too late. Martha was shaking so much she could barely stand. "Good heavens! You'll catch pneumonia," exclaimed the housekeeper. "I can't get sick," replied Martha, her teeth chattering. "I need to be here when he leaves." "He already left. He had an early meeting today." Martha looked at the empty garage and her face showed deep disappointment. "So he didn't see me today?" "Oh, he did." "Oh, he was at the window when you arrived." Something in Martha's expression changed, a spark of hope. "And he still left without acknowledging me. You don't understand how hardened he's become. But come inside and dry off, or you'll freeze to death." "I can't enter the property without his permission." "I give permission. I've worked here longer than many people have lived." Beatrice opened the gate and practically dragged Martha inside. She took her around the back of the house, straight into the spacious, cozy kitchen. "Sit here by the stove," she instructed, turning on all the burners. "I'll fetch a towel and some dry clothes." Martha sat on the rustic wooden chair and looked around the kitchen. It was bigger than some apartments she had lived in. White tiles, oak cabinets, a dining table for 8, a pantry that looked like a small supermarket. But what caught her attention most was a small photograph stuck to the refrigerator. It showed a girl of about 8, smiling and holding an ice cream. The child had curly brown hair and bright blue eyes. Martha stood up slowly and approached the photo. Her hands were trembling, and it wasn't just from the cold anymore. "That's Claire," said Beatrice, returning with a fluffy towel and a set of clothes. "It was my favorite picture of her. The boss doesn't know I kept a copy." "She is beautiful," murmured Martha, delicately touching the glass of the frame. "Are you all right? You've gone pale all of a sudden." Martha stepped away from the photo quickly. "Just the cold. May I change?" "Of course. Use the bathroom over there. And don't worry, the boss won't be back until tonight." When Martha came out of the bathroom wearing the borrowed clothes, Beatrice was preparing a plate of hot food. "Vegetable soup and homemade bread. You need to eat properly." "Thank you, Beatrice. I don't know how to repay such kindness." "Tell me about your daughter," requested the housekeeper sitting at the table. "I noticed how you looked at Claire's photo." Martha hesitated, stirring the soup without eating. "Did she look like Claire?" "Very much." Martha's voice was almost a whisper. "Same hair, same eyes, same dimple when she smiled." Beatrice looked confused. "How do you know about the dimple?" "I didn't mention that yesterday." Martha realized another mistake. "All pretty children have dimples," she tried to cover. "No, ma'am. Claire had a very specific mark, a dimple only on her right cheek, right here." She pointed to her own face. "It was the cutest thing in the world." The fork slipped from Martha's hand and fell onto the plate with a metallic clatter. "Are you all right?" asked Beatrice, concerned. "Sorry, I'm still shivering from the cold." But Beatrice was beginning to notice strange things. The way Martha knew details about the house, how she reacted to information about Claire, how her eyes welled up with tears every time the girl was mentioned. "Martha, may I ask a direct question?" "Of course. Have you been in this house before?" The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Martha looked at Beatrice, then at the kitchen around her, then again at the photo of Claire on the refrigerator. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you act like you know this place, and you react to everything about Claire as if she were important to you too." Martha got up from the table, walking to the window that looked out onto the backyard garden. "Everyone thinks they know the whole story of other people," she said without turning around. "But the truth is we never know even half of it." "What truth, Martha?" Before she could answer, they heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Richard had come back early. "My God, he can't find you here," whispered Beatrice, panicking. "Then I'll leave right now." "There's no time, he's coming in the front." Beatrice pushed Martha into the pantry, closing the door just as Richard entered the kitchen. "Beatrice, why are you so nervous?" he asked, noticing the housekeeper's agitation. "Nervous? Who's nervous?" "I'm not nervous, sir." Richard looked around the kitchen and noticed 2 dirty plates on the table. "Did you have a visitor?" "Oh, I just ate twice. You know how it is, you get older and you forget you already ate," she laughed nervously. "Beatrice, you're lying to me." The housekeeper sighed, knowing it was no use trying to fool Richard. "The woman who comes here every day arrives soaked by the rain. I felt sorry for her." "And where is she now?" "She left." "Beatrice." "All right, she's in the pantry. But before you explode, listen to what she has to say. There's something strange about this woman." Richard marched to the pantry and flung the door open. Martha was there, still wearing the borrowed clothes, her damp hair framing her pale face. "How dare you enter my house?" he shouted. "It's my fault, sir," intervened Beatrice. "I brought her inside. And you," he pointed at Martha, "are trespassing on private property." "I know," she replied, stepping out of the pantry with dignity. "And I apologize. But I didn't come here for no reason." "I don't care why you came. I want you out now." "Richard Harrington," said Martha, using his full name for the first time. Something in the way she pronounced his name made Richard stop shouting. "How do you know my full name?" "I know many things about you." "Like what?" Martha looked around the kitchen, then fixed her eyes on the photo of Claire. "I know you have a doll stored in the attic, an old porcelain doll with a blue dress and white ribbons." Richard's face paled instantly. How do you know that?" "Because that doll belonged to your daughter. It was Isabella's favorite toy." Richard staggered, leaning on the kitchen counter. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" "I want to work in this house for a week. In return, I'll tell you everything I know about Claire, about where she might be, about why Evelyn took her away." "You know where my daughter is?" Richard's voice came out strangled. "Maybe, but I'll only talk if you give me a chance." Richard looked at Beatrice, who was watching everything with wide eyes. "1 week," he said finally, "but you don't go beyond the ground floor, and I want answers every day." "Agreed. And I want to know who you really are." "By the end of the week, you'll know everything," promised Martha. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Richard spent the entire night without sleeping, pacing back and forth in his room. The mention of the doll had shaken him deeply. That toy really was Claire's favorite, and it had been stored in the attic for 15 years, exactly as Martha had described. But how did she know? Only 3 people knew that detail: him, Evelyn, and Claire herself, and only he knew where the doll was kept. The next morning, Richard came down earlier than usual and found Martha in the kitchen, already wearing an apron and making coffee. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I didn't sleep at all. And you? How did you get in here?" "Beatrice gave me a back door key. I arrived at 5 in the morning to start work." Richard looked around and noticed the kitchen was even cleaner than normal. The floor was shining, all surfaces were spotless, and there was a scent of fresh lemon in the air. "You cleaned all this in 1 hour?" "In 2. I started with the living room." Richard walked to the living room and was impressed. Every piece of furniture was gleaming, every ornament in its perfect place, every cushion arranged with military precision. "How did you know where everything goes?" "Female intuition," replied Martha, appearing behind him with a cup of coffee. "Coffee just the way you like it. Strong, no sugar, in a white porcelain cup." Richard took the cup with trembling hands. "How do you know how I like my coffee?" "That's the first piece of information I'll give you. But first I want to know one thing. Do you really not remember me?" Richard studied her face intensely. Martha was about 45, with brown hair streaked with grey, tired but still beautiful green eyes, delicate features despite being excessively thin. "Should I remember?" 20 years ago I worked in your office." "Impossible. I never had an employee with your name." "Because my name wasn't Martha back then." Richard nearly dropped the cup. "What was your name?" "Mary Donovan. I was your personal secretary." Richard's world stopped. Mary Donovan, the 25-year-old who had been his secretary for 2 years, the woman he had fallen madly in love with even though he was married, the only person who had made his heart beat out of rhythm in 2 decades of a lukewarm marriage. "Mary," he whispered, studying her face again. "Now you remember." Richard let the cup fall. It shattered on the marble floor, scattering coffee and porcelain everywhere. "No, it can't be you. Mary had black hair. She was different. 20 years change a person, Richard, especially when she goes through everything I've been through. But you disappeared. One day you simply didn't come to work. I never saw you again. Because I found out I was expecting a baby. Your baby." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard leaned against the wall, feeling his legs weaken. "A baby? Our baby?" "A girl, beautiful as an angel, exactly like her father." Where is she?" "That's a long story, Richard, and a painful one." Beatrice appeared in the room, saw the broken cup and the state of shock the two were in. "Did something happen?" "Beatrice," said Richard, his voice coming out hoarse, Do you remember Mary, my secretary from 20 years ago? The housekeeper looked at Martha and her eyes widened. Good heavens, that's why you looked familiar. But you were quite different back then. You remember her? Asked Richard. Of course I do. Miss Mary used to come here to pick up documents the boss forgot. A lovely, polite young lady. Miss Evelyn didn't like her very much. Why didn't Evelyn like her? Beatrice looked nervously from Richard to Martha. Because, well, it was kind of obvious there was something between the two of you. Richard ran his hands through his hair, trying to process everything. Mary, tell me everything. From the beginning. Martha sat on the living room sofa, her hands trembling slightly. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. You were married. I was just a secretary. I decided to leave the job without giving any explanations. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid of your wife's reaction, of your reaction, of losing my job, and on top of that, causing problems in your marriage. You should have told me, said Richard, sitting down beside her. Maybe, but I made the decision I thought was right at the time. I left for Tennessee to my older sister's house. And the baby? Was born healthy, a perfect little girl, with your blue eyes and your curly hair. I named her Claire. Richard felt his heart stop. Claire, like your grandmother's name, the one you always mentioned so fondly. But my daughter's name is Claire. The daughter I had with Evelyn is named Claire. Martha smiled sadly. Because she wasn't Evelyn's daughter, Richard. She was our daughter. The world collapsed around Richard. He stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth across the room. That's impossible. Evelyn got pregnant 2 years after you left. Claire is her daughter. Evelyn was never able to get pregnant, Richard. You tried for years before I showed up at the company, remember? Richard stopped pacing. It was true. He and Evelyn had tried to have children for years without success. Then how? When my sister got sick and couldn't take care of Claire anymore, I came back to New York City. I was struggling, without a steady job, living on someone else's kindness. One day, Child Protective Services showed up at the house where I was staying and took my daughter. Why? Because someone had made an anonymous report that I wasn't in a position to care for her. I didn't own a home, didn't have a registered job, didn't have family for support. And what happened to her? She was put up for adoption, and guess who adopted her? Richard sat down heavily in the armchair. Evelyn. Your wife was desperate for a child. She knew influential people in the adoption system, and when she saw a beautiful, healthy 2-year-old girl, she didn't hesitate to adopt her. But she never told me it was an adoption. She always pretended Claire was her biological daughter. Because she knew you would suspect. Claire looked too much like you for it to be a coincidence. And Evelyn didn't want to risk you finding out the truth and wanting to find the birth mother. Beatrice, who had listened to everything in silence, finally spoke. That explains a lot. Mrs. Evelyn was always very protective of Claire. She wouldn't let anyone ask questions about her pregnancy, and she always changed the subject when someone commented on how much the girl took after her father. Richard was devastated. For 15 years, I believed I had a daughter with Evelyn, and in truth, she was my daughter with you. And I spent 15 years looking for her, said Martha, tears streaming down her face. When I found out she had been adopted by the Harringtons, I started investigating. I found out where you lived, but it took me years to gather the courage to come here. Why didn't you come sooner? Because I was afraid of your reaction. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, and I was afraid of ruining Claire's life if she was happy. And when Evelyn took her away, that's what gave me the courage to finally show up, because I realized you were suffering as much as I was, that you had also lost our daughter. Richard stood and went to the window, looking out at the garden where Claire used to play. She liked to plant flowers right over there. He pointed to a flower bed near the fountain. She said she wanted to have a giant garden when she grew up. She always liked plants, Martha confirmed. Even as a little girl, she tried to plant bean seeds in yogurt cups. Richard turned to her. Do you remember her when she was little? I remember everything. Her first smile, her first steps, her first word. And then I don't remember anything more. Because she was taken from me. The silence that followed was heavy with pain and guilt. Richard sat down again, this time closer to Martha. "Are you sure you're our daughter?" "I have all the documents. The original birth certificate, where you're listed as the father, adoption process papers, even photos of her as a baby where the resemblance to you is undeniable." "Did you bring these things?" "They're hidden in a safe place. I can get them tomorrow if you want to see." "I do. I need to see everything." "Richard," said Martha softly, "I know you must be in shock. I know it's a lot of information to process, but I need you to understand one thing. I didn't come here to cause trouble. I came because we're the only ones who can find our daughter." "Do you believe we can find her?" "I have faith that we can. But I need your help. You have resources, contacts, influence. Alone, I've tried everything and couldn't." Richard stayed quiet for a long time, processing everything he had heard. Finally, he looked at Martha with a softer expression. "Forgive me for treating you badly these days. If I had known—" "You couldn't have known. I've changed a lot. Life hasn't been kind to me." "What happened to you all these years?" "After I lost Claire, I fell into a deep depression. I lost several jobs. Couldn't concentrate on anything. I was admitted to a psychiatric clinic for 2 years." "Martha, when I got out, I tried to rebuild my life. But with every job I got, every place I lived, I thought of Claire. I wondered if she was okay, if she was happy, if she remembered me." "And how did you find out where she was?" "By chance. 3 years ago I saw a piece in a newspaper about you. It was a report about successful businessmen from New York City. There was a photo of you with Evelyn and a teenage girl. When I saw her face, I knew immediately it was my daughter. Why did it take 3 years to come here? Because I spent that time gathering evidence, organizing documents, trying to find the courage. And also because I wasn't in a condition to appear before you. I was in a bad place financially, emotionally." "And are you better now?" Martha gave a bitter laugh. "Now I'm in the worst situation of my life, but I'm also more desperate. When I found out Evelyn had run away with Claire, I realized it was now or never." Richard stood up and extended his hand to her. "We'll find our daughter, Mary, I promise you." "Martha," she corrected. "I changed my name after I left the clinic. Mary died when she lost her daughter. Now I'm Martha." "Then we'll find our daughter, Martha." That night, Richard couldn't eat. He locked himself in his office and spent hours looking at old photos of Claire, now seeing in them not just resemblances to himself, but also traces of Martha. The dimple in her right cheek was just like Martha's when she was young, the way she tilted her head when she was thoughtful, the mischievous smile when she was up to something. How had he not noticed before? How had he been so blind? Around 2 in the morning, he went down to the kitchen for a glass of water and found Martha sitting at the table, looking at the photo of Claire that was on the refrigerator. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "I haven't slept properly in 15 years, she replied, without taking her eyes off the photo. "Every night I wonder where she is, if she's okay, if she has friends, if she's studying, if she has a boyfriend." Richard sat down beside her. "She was fine when she left. She was a normal teenager, a bit rebellious, but happy. Got good grades in school, had lots of friends. Tell me more about her. What was she like?" "Smart. Very smart. Questioned everything, wanted to understand how things worked, and stubborn, just like me." Martha smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "When she was little, she would take apart all her toys to see what was inside. Drove me crazy. She still did that. Took apart the school's entire computer when she was 12. Just to see how it worked. And what else? What was she like as a person? Affectionate. Very affectionate. She always hugged everyone, always concerned if people were okay. And creative. She loved to draw, to invent stories. She drew a lot when she was little too. She mostly drew happy families. Father, mother and daughter holding hands." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. "Why do you think Evelyn ran away with her?" "Fear," answered Martha without hesitation. Fear that one day you would discover the truth. Fear that I would show up to claim my daughter. Fear of losing the girl she loved as if she were her own. Do you think Evelyn truly loved Claire? I'm sure she did. She may have done everything wrong, may have lied to you and to her, but she had genuine love for our daughter, and that gives me hope that she's taking good care of her. So you're not angry with Evelyn? Martha was quiet for a long time. I am angry, yes. Angry that she separated the two of you from me. Angry that she prevented me from seeing my daughter grow up. But I'm also grateful because I know she gave Claire a life that I couldn't give at the time. And now? What do you want to happen when we find Claire? I want to meet the woman my daughter has become. I want her to know she has a biological mother who never stopped loving her. And I want her to make her own decisions about what kind of relationship she wants to have with me. You don't want to take her away? Richard, our daughter is 20 years old now. She's an adult. She has her own life, her own choices. I just want the chance to meet her and for her to meet me. Richard was impressed by Martha's maturity. I thought you wanted to recover the lost time. Lost time cannot be recovered, but the time we still have ahead, that can be built beautifully. They talked until dawn, sharing memories of Claire, filling in the gaps in each other's stories. Richard told about the first time the girl called him Dad, about how she loved to hear bedtime stories, about how she cried on the first day of school. Martha told about the first 2 years of their daughter's life, about the sleepless nights when she was sick, about the first words, about how Claire used to laugh when she saw little birds at the window. When Mrs. Beatrice arrived for work at 6 in the morning, she found the two still talking in the kitchen, surrounded by photo albums that Richard had brought down from the bedroom. You've been up all night. We had 15 years of conversation to catch up on, replied Richard. And now, what's the plan to find Claire? Richard looked at Martha. First, we'll look at all the documents you have. Then, I'll hire a private investigator, the best I can find. I've already tried private investigators, said Martha. I spent all my savings on it. But now you have resources, my resources. We'll hire as many investigators as necessary. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. That same afternoon, Martha returned with a bag of documents. Richard examined each paper carefully. Claire's original birth certificate, where he was listed as the father, photos of the girl as a baby, where the resemblance to him was undeniable, adoption process documents, medical reports, even some baby clothes that Martha had kept all these years. My God, murmured Richard, holding a small pink sweater. This outfit, Claire wore one just like it when she was 3. I always wondered where Evelyn had bought it, because it looked worn. Because it was worn. It was from when she was 6 months old. Richard looked at all the documents scattered across the office desk. There's no doubt. Claire is our daughter. And now? Now we will use every possible resource to find her. Richard called the best private investigator in New York City, a man named Michael Reed, who had a reputation for finding missing people in impossible cases. Michael, this is Richard Harrington. I need your services for a very important case. Personal. The investigator arrived the next day, a man of 60 with graying hair and keen eyes. Richard and Martha told him the whole story. It's a complex case, said Michael, analyzing the documents. Do you have any clue where Evelyn might have gone? She had a sister in Washington, D.C., Richard remembered, and she also talked a lot about a small town in Tennessee where she spent her childhood. I'll start there. But I need you to understand, finding someone who doesn't want to be found can take time, and it's possible that when we find them, the situation will be complicated. Complicated how? Asked Martha. Evelyn may have told a different version of the story to Claire. She may have created a new identity for both of them, and Claire may be happy with the life she has now. We understand, said Richard, but we need to try. I'll begin the investigation today. I have contacts in several states. If they're in the country, I'll find them. While they awaited news from the investigator, Richard and Martha began living together in the mansion. It was strange at first, two strangers who had once been intimate. now united by the pain of a shared loss. Martha kept her word about working in the house. She cleaned, cooked, organized everything with an almost obsessive care. Richard realized she did it as a form of therapy, a way to keep busy while they waited. "You don't need to do so much," he said one afternoon, finding her polishing every piece in the dining room's crystal cabinet. "Yes, I do. It helps me not to go crazy with anxiety." "Martha, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why have you changed so much? When you were Mary, you were different, more cheerful, more alive." Martha stopped cleaning and sat in one of the dining room chairs. "Have you ever lost a child, Richard?" "I did, when Claire left." "Then you understand. But imagine losing a child knowing they are alive somewhere, but you can't see them, you can't touch them, you can't know if they're well. It's a kind of constant torture. Forgive me." "For what?" "For not being by your side when you needed me, for not helping you raise our daughter, for letting all this happen. You didn't know, Richard. If you had known, I'm sure you would have acted differently." "I would have. I would have left everything to be with you too. Even being married." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Even being married. Because you two would have been my real family." 2 weeks later, Michael called with the first lead. "I found records for Evelyn Harrington in Nashville," he said over the phone. "She is using her maiden name, Evelyn Vance, and there are records of a 20-year-old young woman with her named Claire Vance." Richard and Martha looked at each other, their hearts racing. "Where exactly are they?" asked Richard. "In a residential neighborhood of Nashville. Evelyn works as a teacher at a private school. Claire is studying education at the State University." "Education?" whispered Martha, tears in her eyes. "She wants to be a teacher." "I'll send you the address, but I advise caution in your approach. You can't just show up at their door." "What do you suggest?" asked Richard. "Observation first. Understand their routine, see how they're living. Then plan a careful approach." When Richard hung up the phone, he and Martha just looked at each other in silence. "We found our daughter," he finally said. "We found her," she replied, but her voice didn't sound relieved. It sounded scared. "What is it? What if she doesn't want to meet us? What if she's happy without us?" "We'll find out, but we're not giving up now." Richard and Martha traveled to Nashville the next day. Michael had booked a hotel near the neighborhood where Evelyn and Claire lived and had already done reconnaissance of the area. "They live in a simple but well-kept house," explained the investigator. "Evelyn leaves every day at 7 in the morning for work. Claire has classes in the afternoon, so she leaves around 2. "And at night?" asked Martha. "They stay home. Sometimes they go out for a walk around the neighborhood square. They seem to have a quiet, normal life." Richard and Martha spent 2 days just observing from a distance. On the 3rd day, they saw Claire for the first time. She was leaving the university in the late afternoon, carrying a backpack full of books and talking animatedly with a friend. She was taller than Richard remembered, had cut her hair a bit shorter, but she was undeniably the same girl he had raised. "It's her," whispered Martha, tears streaming down her face. "Our daughter." Richard couldn't speak. He just watched the young woman he hadn't seen in 5 years, noticing how she had become a beautiful and seemingly happy woman. "She looks well," he managed to say finally. "She does. And happy." They watched Claire say goodbye to her friend and get on a bus. Then they followed the bus by car until they saw her get off near the house where she lived. "And now?" asked Martha. "Now we get to know the neighborhood. We'll familiarize ourselves with the places she frequents, and we'll plan how to approach her." In the following days, Richard and Martha discovered that Claire had a fairly regular routine. She studied at home in the morning, went to the university in the afternoon, and sometimes spent evenings at a nearby diner, studying with friends. "She was always studious," commented Richard, watching his daughter through the diner window. "And sociable. She has several friends around her." "How do you think we should approach her?" Martha thought for a moment. "Naturally, without lies, but also without shocks. Maybe by frequenting the same places she does, letting her get to know us gradually. As strangers, as people interested in the school where she studies. You could pretend you're thinking about making a donation or something like that. Richard liked the idea. And you? I can introduce myself as someone interested in the education program, maybe saying I'm thinking about going back to school. They put the plan into action the following week. Richard introduced himself at the university as a businessman interested in learning about the education program for a potential partnership. Martha enrolled as an auditor in some classes. That's how on a Thursday afternoon, Martha found herself sitting in the same classroom as her daughter. Claire was in the third row, paying attention to the lecture on child development. Martha sat at the back of the room, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. When the class ended, Martha stood up slowly, organizing her materials. Claire passed by her on the way out, and for a moment their hands brushed. "Sorry," said Claire, smiling. "It's nothing," replied Martha, almost voiceless. It was the first time in 15 years that she had touched her daughter. That night, Richard found Martha crying in the hotel room. "What happened?" "She touched me. By accident, but she touched me. And she smiled at me." Richard hugged her, feeling his own tears begin to fall. "How is she?" "Beautiful, smart, polite. Evelyn did a good job raising her." "And that makes you sad?" "No. It leaves me grateful, and at the same time heartbroken because I lost all of that." They continued attending the university for 2 weeks. Martha attended several classes with Claire, and Richard visited the institution a few times to discuss partnerships. It was during one of these visits that Richard finally spoke with Claire. She was in the library studying alone when he approached. "Excuse me, are you in the education program?" Claire looked up from her books, and Richard felt the world stop. It was like looking at a female version of himself from 20 years earlier. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "I'm considering making a donation to the program and would like to understand how it works a bit better. Could you explain it to me?" "Of course." Claire closed her book and gave him her full attention. "The program is excellent. The professors are very qualified and the curriculum is quite comprehensive." Richard asked several questions about the program, but he was really just watching his daughter speak. He noticed how she gestured when she was excited, how she bit her lip when she was thinking, how her eyes shone when she talked about education. "Have you always wanted to be a teacher?" he asked. "Always. Since I was a little girl I played school. My mother says I taught math to my dolls." "Your mother must be proud of you." "She is. She's also a teacher. She says she's the one who inspired me." Richard felt a pang of jealousy but pushed it away. "And your father? What does he think of your choice?" Claire hesitated for a moment. "My father doesn't live with us anymore. It's been a few years." "I'm sorry." "It's okay. Actually, he wasn't my biological father anyway. My mother told me I was adopted when I was little." Richard almost choked. "Your mother told you you were adopted?" "She did. She said my biological parents couldn't raise me at the time, so they gave me up for adoption, and that she and my adoptive father chose me because they really wanted a daughter." "And how do you feel about that?" "At first it was hard to accept, but now I understand they gave me the best life they could. I'm grateful for that." "Have you ever thought about looking for your biological parents?" Claire was quiet for a long moment. "I have, especially after my adoptive father left. But my mother gets very sad when I bring it up. I think she's afraid of losing me." "And you? Are you afraid too?" "A little. I'm afraid to look and find out they don't want to know me, or that they're bad people, or that they have a life with no room for me." Richard felt the urge to tell her everything right then, but he controlled himself. "And if they were good people, and if they really wanted to meet you, then it would be wonderful. But I think that only happens in the movies." When Richard returned to the hotel, he told Martha everything. "She knows she was adopted," he concluded, "and she wants to meet us, but she's afraid." "And Evelyn, how does she feel?" "She's afraid of losing Claire. That's why she doesn't encourage the search." Poor Evelyn. She must have been tormented for years. Richard looked at Martha with surprise. "You feel sorry for her?" "I do. She loves our daughter, Richard, and she's suffering with the possibility of losing her." I understand that feeling. What do you think we should do? I think it's time we talk to Evelyn. Are you sure? I am. This game of hide-and-seek has gone on long enough. We're all suffering. It's time to put our cards on the table. Richard agreed, but they both knew it would be one of the most difficult conversations of their lives. They decided to approach Evelyn on a Saturday afternoon, when she usually did her grocery shopping at the neighborhood supermarket. Richard and Martha waited for her in the parking lot, both their hearts racing. When Evelyn came out of the supermarket pushing a shopping cart, Richard approached. "Evelyn." She turned and almost dropped the cart when she saw him. "Richard." "What? How did you find me?" "We need to talk." It was then that Evelyn noticed Martha beside him. Her eyes widened and she turned pale. "Mary? Are you Mary?" "I'm Martha now. But yes, it's me." Evelyn looked from one to the other, then looked around the parking lot as if searching for an escape route. "You've come to take Claire." "We've come to talk," said Richard. "All of us." "She doesn't know you're here." "She doesn't. But I think it's time she knew the truth. The whole truth." Evelyn leaned on the shopping cart, her legs trembling. "You're going to take her from me." "No one is taking anyone from anyone," said Martha gently. "Evelyn, Claire is 20 years old. She's an adult. The decisions are hers now. But you are the biological parents. She'll want to stay with you." "And if she does, will you accept that?" asked Richard. Evelyn began to cry. "I love her as if she were my own blood, more than anything in my life." "I know," said Martha, "and she loves you too. That will never change." "How do you know?" "Because we've been watching you both. We see how she looks at you, how she worries about you. You are her mother, Evelyn, the mother who raised her, who was present, who brought her up. No one can take that away." Evelyn cried even harder. "I always knew this day would come. I was always afraid." "Why did you run away with her?" asked Richard. "Because I found out Mary was looking for you. Someone told me a woman was asking questions about you at the company. I was afraid it was her. And if it was, I would lose Claire." "You could have talked to me," said Richard. "You could have told the truth." "And what would you have done? Chosen between your biological daughter and your wife?" Richard fell silent because he didn't know the answer. "Besides," Evelyn continued, "I was afraid you would want Claire back, and I couldn't live without her." "We understand," said Martha. "But now she's an adult, and she deserves to know the truth. Are you going to tell her?" "We'll tell her together," suggested Richard. "The three of us, so she understands the whole story." "What if she gets angry with me for lying all these years?" "Then you'll talk and work it out, the way a family does," said Martha. Evelyn looked at her in surprise. "You consider me family? You are the mother who raised my daughter. That makes you the most important person in her life, after herself." "Of course I consider you family." In that moment something changed in Evelyn's face. The fear gave way to an expression of relief. "All right, let's tell her everything. But I choose how and when." "Agreed." Evelyn asked for a day to prepare and organize her thoughts. On Sunday afternoon, she called Richard. "Come to the house now. I'm going to tell Claire everything." Richard and Martha drove to Evelyn's house with their hearts in their throats. It was a simple two-story house with a small but well-kept garden in front. Evelyn greeted them at the door, visibly nervous. "She's in the living room. I told her I had a surprise for her." When they entered the living room, Claire was sitting on the sofa, wearing a simple dress and with a curious expression on her face. "Claire," said Evelyn, her voice trembling slightly, "I want to introduce you to two very important people." Claire looked at Richard and Martha, and something in her face changed, as if somehow she already knew. "This is Richard Harrington, and this is Martha Sullivan," Evelyn continued. They are your biological parents." The silence that followed was deafening. Claire looked at the three adults in front of her, processing the information. "My biological parents?" she repeated slowly. "Yes," replied Richard, taking a step forward. "I am your father, and Martha is your mother." Claire stood up from the sofa, walking to the window. All this time you were looking for me." "I have been," said Martha, "since the day you were taken from me." "And I didn't even know you existed," added Richard. "Until 2 weeks ago, I didn't know you were my biological daughter." Claire turned to Evelyn. "Did you always know?" "Always," admitted Evelyn, tears in her eyes. "And I was always afraid of this moment." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was afraid of losing you. You are everything to me, Claire. I can't imagine my life without you." Claire went back to the sofa and sat down heavily. "I need to understand everything, from the beginning." And so, for the next 3 hours, Richard, Martha and Evelyn told the whole story. Every detail, every lie, every heartache, every decision made out of love or fear. Claire listened to everything in silence, asking occasional questions, but mostly trying to process all that information. When they finished, she was quiet for a long time. "So, to sum up," she finally said, "my biological mother searched for me for 15 years. My biological father believed I was his wife's daughter, and my adoptive mother ran away with me so she wouldn't lose the daughter she loves." "That's right," confirmed Richard, "and all of you suffered all these years." "We did," admitted Martha. Claire looked at Evelyn. "Mum, do you love me? More than my own life?" Then she looked at Martha. "And you? Do you love me even without knowing me? I've loved you since before you were born, and I have loved you every single day of these 20 years, even without being by your side." Finally, she looked at Richard. "And you? I raised you for 15 years believing you were my daughter. Then I suffered for 5 years missing you. Now I find out you really are my daughter, truly mine. I can't even begin to explain what I feel." Claire stood up again and went to each of them. She hugged Evelyn first. "Thank you for raising me, for loving me, for giving me the best life you could." Then she hugged Richard. "Thank you for being my father all these years, for teaching me to ride a bike, for coming to school plays, for comforting me when I cried." Lastly, she hugged Martha. "And thank you for never giving up on looking for me, for loving me even from afar." When they separated, everyone was crying. "And now?" asked Evelyn. "Now we are going to be a different kind of family," said Claire. "A family that has 3 parents and 1 daughter, and we are going to make it work. Are you sure?" "I am. I've spent my whole life feeling like something was missing. Now I know what it was. It wasn't a lack of love, because I always had more than enough love from Mom. It was wholeness. The other pieces of the puzzle were missing." Richard looked at Martha and then at Evelyn. "That means we all are going to have to learn to live together." "It does," agreed Claire. "And it won't be easy. There will be jealousy, there will be arguments, there will be difficult moments, but there will also be a lot of love. And that's what matters." Martha took Evelyn's hand. "Are you in?" "I am. But on one condition. Claire continues to live with me until she finishes college." "I accept that condition," said Richard, "but you two will move to New York City. I'll buy a beautiful house for you near mine, and Claire will transfer colleges." "I don't want you spending money on me," protested Evelyn. "It's not spending, it's an investment in the family we are building." Claire smiled, and in that smile Richard and Martha saw the girl they had lost and the woman she had become. "Then it's decided. We are going to be the most complicated and most beautiful family in the world." 6 months later, the 3 women were living in a spacious house in New York City, 15 minutes from Richard's mansion. Claire had managed to transfer colleges and was loving her new professors. Evelyn got a job at an excellent private school, and Martha was in therapy and rebuilding her life. Richard visited every day, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes to help Claire with some college work. At first, it was strange for everyone. Evelyn was jealous of the time Claire spent with Richard and Martha. Martha felt guilty for stealing moments that belonged to Evelyn. Richard didn't know how to balance his love for his daughter with respect for the woman who had raised her. But little by little they found a rhythm. They established family traditions, like Sunday dinners all together, family outings, birthday and holiday celebrations. Claire became the bridge between everyone, helping each one understand the other's feelings, mediating conflicts, reminding everyone that love doesn't diminish when it's divided but multiplies. 1 year after the reunion, on a Sunday afternoon, the four of them were in the garden of the women's house. Richard was teaching Claire how to plant rose bushes, Martha was preparing a snack, and Evelyn was reading a book in the shade. "Dad," Claire said suddenly. Richard stopped working the soil. "Yes?" "Thank you for finding me." "I didn't find you, sweetheart. Your birth mother found you. I was just lucky to be in the way." Claire looked at Martha, who was cutting fruit on the porch. "Mom, Martha!" she shouted. Martha looked up. "Yes, honey? Thank you for never giving up on me." Martha smiled, wiping tears with her apron. "I would never give up on you." Then Claire looked at Evelyn. "Mom, Evelyn, speak, my love. Thank you for raising me with so much love." Evelyn closed the book and went over to them. "It was the greatest honor of my life." Richard stood up, brushing the dirt from his hands. "You know what I'm thinking?" "What?" asked the three women at the same time. "That life is funny. Sometimes it separates people who should be together. But if the love is true, one day it finds a way to bring everyone together." "Do you think it was fate?" asked Claire. "I think it was love," replied Martha, moving closer to the group. "Love always finds a way." "And now?" asked Evelyn. "What does the future hold for this crazy family?" Richard looked at the three women in his life, the daughter he had lost and found again, the ex-wife who had become a dear friend, and the woman he had loved in the past and who was now part of his family in a completely new way. "Now we take it one day at a time," he said. "Taking care of each other, building happy memories, and always remembering that family isn't just about who shares the same blood. Family is who chooses to stay and make it work." Claire looked around at the three adults who loved her, each in a unique and special way. "So we're a real family?" "The realest there ever was," replied Richard. And for the first time in 20 years, all the pieces of the puzzle fit together perfectly. 2 years later, Claire graduated with honors in education. At the graduation party, she was radiant on stage, and in the audience there were 3 people cheering for her as if she were the most important person in the world. Richard, Martha, and Evelyn were sitting side by side, standing and applauding when Claire's name was called. "She did it," murmured Martha, tears of pride in her eyes. "She did," agreed Evelyn, "and she's going to be an amazing teacher." "Just like her mother's," said Richard, looking at the 2 women beside him. After the ceremony at the celebration dinner, Claire gave a speech none of them would ever forget. "I want to thank the 3 people who made me who I am today," she began, standing up at the restaurant table. "To my father, Richard, who taught me that love knows no barriers, and that family is about choices, not just genetics." Richard discreetly wiped his eyes. "To my mother, Evelyn, who raised me with so much love that I never lacked anything, especially affection and solid values." Evelyn smiled through her tears. "And to my mother, Martha, who taught me that true love never gives up, even when all seems lost." Martha couldn't hold back her tears. "You 3 are proof that love can heal any wound, can unite any family, and can overcome any obstacle. Thank you for teaching me that there is no greater or lesser love, only different love, and that a family can be built in many different ways, as long as it's built with true love." When she finished the speech, the 4 of them hugged in a collective embrace that lasted several minutes. "I love you," said Claire. "We love you too," the 3 replied in unison. In that moment, looking at that unique and special family, anyone passing by the restaurant would see 4 people who had found what everyone seeks: a place where they belong, people who love them unconditionally, and the certainty that no matter what happens, they will always have each other. The story that began with a desperate woman begging for work in exchange for shelter had transformed into the most beautiful family love story anyone could imagine. Richard never felt alone in the big mansion again, because now it was always full of life, laughter, conversations, and the pleasant noise of a family that chose to stay together. Martha regained not only her daughter but also her reason for living. She began to smile again, to dream again, to believe again that life can be good. Evelyn discovered that a mother's love doesn't diminish when it's shared, but grows, and that she hadn't lost a daughter, but gained a larger family, And Claire learned that a person can have more than one mother, more than one source of love, and that this doesn't make her confused or divided, but blessed. 5 years after the reunion, on a sunny Saturday morning, the four were in the garden of Evelyn and Martha's house, which they now shared in harmony, when Claire made an announcement that left everyone speechless. "I have some news for you," she said, smiling in a way they didn't recognize. "What news?" asked Richard. "You're going to be grandparents." The silence that followed was one of pure shock and joy. "Grandparents?" repeated Martha. "I'm pregnant. 3 months." Richard was the first to react, standing up and hugging his daughter tightly. "Congratulations, my daughter." "I'm so happy." "And the father?" asked Evelyn. "It's Tyler, my college boyfriend. You like him?" "Of course we do," said Martha. "When are you getting married?" "In 2 months, and I want all 3 of you to walk me down the aisle." "All 3?" asked Richard. "All 3. I can't choose which of my parents will give me away, so I want you all to accompany me." And so it was that, 2 months later, in a small church filled with flowers, Claire walked down the aisle accompanied by Richard, Martha, and Evelyn. The groom, Tyler, waited at the altar with a huge smile, and in the front row were Beatrice, who had become part of the family, and Dr. Michael Reed, who had become a dear friend. When the priest asked, "Who gives this bride?" the 3 answered in unison, "We do." There wasn't a dry eye in the church. 6 months later, when their first grandchild was born, Richard held the baby in his arms, while Martha and Evelyn argued over who would be the first to change the diaper. "What shall we call him?" Richard asked Claire. "Noah," she replied, "like the angel who protects families." "Noah," repeated Martha. "Perfect." "And will he have 3 grandmothers too?" joked Evelyn. 3 grandmothers, 1 grandfather, and lots of love, confirmed Claire, just like his mother had. That afternoon, seeing 4 generations gathered in the same room, everyone understood they had lived through the most beautiful proof that true love always finds a way to unite the people who were meant to be together. Richard looked out the window of the house and saw the golden sunset painting the sky. 6 years ago, he was a bitter and lonely man. Today, he was surrounded by the most loving family he could imagine. Martha was rocking her little grandson and softly singing a lullaby. 6 years ago, she was a desperate woman begging for shelter. Today, she had a home full of love and purpose. Evelyn was helping Claire organize the baby's things. 6 years ago, she lived in fear of losing her daughter. Today, she knew she had gained an entire family, and Claire, at the center of it all, looked at the 3 people who loved her and at the son she had just had, knowing she was the luckiest woman in the world. "Thank you," she whispered, not addressing anyone in particular. "Why?" asked Richard. "For not giving up, for finding a way to make it work, for showing me that family is about love, not perfection." "Thank you," said Martha, "for teaching us that forgiveness is possible, that love always wins, and that a family can be rebuilt, even after years apart." "And thank you," said Evelyn to Richard, "for not being angry with me for running away with her. And thank you," said Richard to Evelyn, "for taking such good care of our daughter all these years." At that moment, little Noah opened his eyes for the first time and looked at each of his grandparents as if he were memorizing every face, every smile, every tear of joy. "Welcome to our crazy family, my love," Claire whispered to her son. "You're going to have more love than you know what to do with." And as the sun set outside, inside that house there was only light, the light of unconditional love, of chosen family, of hope that never fades, and the certainty that no matter how many storms life brings, when there is true love, there is always a way to start over. The woman who once asked to sweep a house in exchange for shelter had found much more than a roof over her head. She had found what she had always searched for, a place where she belonged, people who loved her, and the certainty that she would never be alone again. And the man who once denied help to a desperate stranger had learned the most important lesson of his life, that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as problems, and that true love always finds a way back home. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, Leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Richard made the right decision in helping Martha? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and especially to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories.